The number of consumers seeking help to manage debt soared in the first quarter, with inquiries at South Africa's largest debt counsellor up 31% compared to the same period in 2020. That's according to DebtBusters. Benay Sager, head of DebtBusters, joins me now. Thanks so much for your time on SABC News. So what have you found is behind the increase in people seeking debt counselling?
Yeah, thanks for having me on the show. I think there's probably a few factors. The first thing is that incomes have not really increased in South Africa over the last several years. When we compare the incoming cohort in 2021 to that of 2016, we saw that incomes grew only by 7%. And during that period, we know that inflation had a toll of about 24%. So in many ways, our real incomes have gone backwards. So that was one major finding. And the second thing was for consumers to supplement this lack of income growth, they are essentially borrowing more. And they're borrowing particularly with unsecured lending. And there we saw that the average levels were more than 50% higher in 2021 compared to 2016 in terms of levels of unsecured debt. And I think that's kind of what's happening with consumers.
Mm-hmm. Let's take a look at some of those trends from that report, and I'm quoting verbatim here. People applying for debt counselling with take-home pay of over 20,000 Rand a month are spending over 60% of their monthly net income to service debt, and they have a persistently high debt-to-income ratio of over 130%. What's happening?
Yeah, I mean, our heart goes out to the consumers at DebtBusters. What's really happening is consumers are feeling the pinch. Last year was extremely difficult, but even going into the lockdown situation was very difficult in South Africa in terms of the growth with regards to what we have to spend money on in terms of the necessities. And what you see happening is that often consumers believe that another loan will be the answer. And unfortunately, rarely that is the answer. And what's happening is that they're getting more loans. And as a result, they end up having to spend more and more share of their net income to service this debt. And I think one of the challenges in South Africa is that most of this debt comes with really high interest rate, about 23, 24%. So I think that's what you see is happening in the background.
When you're talking about that debt, just to be clear, that's your mortgage, perhaps your car payments if you are buying your car in hire purchase and the like, and then other kinds of debt as well. It's not just unsecured debt, for instance.
Yeah, we see the unsecured debt escalating the highest. In terms of secured debt, what we would consider, as you say, mortgages or finance vehicles, those ratios and the burden of that hasn't gone up. In fact, in most cases, it's gone down because last year, as you would know, there was successive reduction in interest rate, repo rate from the Reserve Bank. That actually helped many consumers. But even with that, the levels of unsecured debt seems to be the one that's climbing. But when we're talking in terms of the 130% being the overall debt level, that does include mortgages and vehicle finance and all the unsecured debt.
All right. So in January 2021, your report is saying consumers with over 142 million Rand in collective debt cleared that debt. What are some of the reasons behind that?
Yeah, so this is a good news story for us. We call them graduates, and these are the consumers who started the program several years ago, but they finished in January 2021 as an example. And just from that consumer group alone, they paid about 114 million Rands worth of debt over the years when they were with us, and then they graduated. So this is a great story in our view, and our staff and my colleagues get really excited about this because this is why we do what we do at DebtBusters. We help consumers get out of debt. So that's what that means. We actually see that the number of consumers clearing their debt and finishing debt counselling successfully increased by over 50% every year since 2016, which I think is a great result.
Mm-hmm. If someone is watching now and they're unsure about whether or not to seek debt counselling, what would you say to them?
For me, it's a no-regret move to get an assessment from a debt counsellor. There's no cost to the assessment. It will take about a 15 to 20-minute telephone call. Get a free assessment and understand where you stand. Of course, they can call us. Our colleagues are ready to assist. For me, it's a no-regret move to really understand and get your credit report firstly, but also look at your budget and some savings ideas. Often our colleagues would also give some tips on where you can save money. If consumers don't want that, we also have a range of self-assessment tools on our website, just like others, to allow the consumer to really get a feel for where they stand financially. For me, I think it's important that our consumers in South Africa get a handle on what their credit report looks like. I will finish by saying that less than 3% of consumers regularly get their credit reports in South Africa. And if you think about the fact that we have almost 30 million credit active consumers, that's an extremely low number. That means we're not really that well equipped to deal with things that come our way when it comes to credit. And we really need to, all of us, do much, much better than that 3%.
Benay Sager, head of DebtBusters, joining me there. Thanks so much for your time on SABC News this afternoon. It's time for a short break. When we come back, we're going to look at manufacturing data. We're also going to be looking at those public service wage negotiations. Maybe a glimmer of hope there.